Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Machine is the Message. I am one of your hosts, Patrick Keenan, and I'm
I'm
joined by.
another one of your hosts, Alan Smith. Happy to be here with another one of your guests, Pietro Gagliano. What is up,
Hey
buddy?
everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. We're super excited to get into who you are, the man, the myth, chat a little bit about creative tools and
And the
AI,
legend.
and then a bit about Toronto and sort of where creativity is at and has been in Toronto. But maybe, just like as we kick it off, we can start with where are you at now? What are you up to, Pietro? Tell us sort of like what's keeping you up at night, or where do you spend your days?
Wow. Well, what's keeping me up at night might be different than where I'm at. But yeah, I am currently building a company called Transitional Forms. We've actually been in the creative AI space for a number of years now, and we are building. We joke with each other that the elevator pitch is robots telling fart jokes, because that's sometimes what it seems like it is. We've created a real-time TV platform where game engine puppets can talk to each other, and you can kind of direct the show, and there's this element of surprise that they don't always do what you ask them to do, but so it's kind of this entertainment Lego. It's almost a toy that we've built, as well as some games and dynamic films and whatnot in the past. But that's what I'm spending my days on now.
And so this is a product you're building. Tell us about who it's for. What's the gap it's filling?
The problem that we're trying to solve is very future facing, and that's kind of been in the DNA of Transitional Forms from the beginning. We see media changing and a paradigm shift coming where there isn't just one author to the content. There is, say a creative human author plus the audience who's interacting with that content, plus machine intelligence that's there to generate and regenerate the content on the fly. So we've been really focused on this three-way authorship notion. It doesn't quite have a name yet, so we're trying to solve a future-facing problem. But it's unraveling quickly, or it's coming to pass quickly. So that's really the problem that we're spending our time solving, is one that doesn't quite have a name yet.
No, that's fascinating. There's like an interplay between, you said, audience, the creator, and the AI, or
Yeah, exactly. Like there are names for content that have interactive content. There's a human author, and they've created some procedural system for the audience to interact. That's a video game. Or if you're telling a story around a campfire and you're reacting to the audience, or live theater, right? Like there are systems that exist like that, but I don't know what to call. And this is something I'll just ask you guys, turn the tables and ask you guys some questions. But what do you call uh, real-time interactive generative media? I don't know. Synthetic media doesn't necessarily mean interactive. Video games aren't necessarily generative. So yeah, we've been trying to figure out what that is and what to call it for many years now. And yeah, that's what we spend our days on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I go to SimCity. I go to the Sims kind of genre, but it's more than that. I mean, I think it depends on what cap you're putting on it, right? Like, can it only
Totally.
build cities, or like, does it have this rule set?
Can it
Yeah,
generate? Can the system think itself and
yeah,
create something that hasn't been there before? So you're like in SimCity, you could have a similar scenario to other people who played it, but what excites me is this media that's more like dreams, where it's being created just for you, and that like no one else has had this experience before. That's yeah, I think that's the paradigm that we're entering right now.
Comparing it to a dream is wild too, and thinking of it from the perspective of, I don't know if you've had this experience when you're using it and what you're creating, but in a dream, when you get somewhere and you're like, like, how did I even get here? Like, why is this even happening right now? Like, has that been the experience in the type of media and experiences that have been created, where you're just like, why are we doing this? Like, how did I get here?
Certainly, I'm nostalgic for almost the days where AI would hallucinate more than it does right now. Like
Oh,
it's very careful and it's very safe and it's very cooperative. But rewind. I'm showing my age on this stuff now, but rewind 4 years or whatever it was when GPT-2 first came out, we would like set it to run and then it would get stuck in these hilarious little loops. And exactly, Alan, we would ask ourselves like, how did he even get here? Why is it stuck on this one thing? But yeah, I miss the days where you could have it hallucinate. And now, there's temperature settings for language models and whatever. If you crank that, it just ends up spitting out like code and not
mm.
like funny ideas, So,
So it's not
um,
like mid-journey weirdness, like you just can't like crank it and hope for the best.
and
Or it'd be
even
like,
then, like
please hallucinate more, ChatGPT. Yes.
exactly, like I wish we could get back to that dream like state, and we will. We're just in this kind of like ugly baby stage,
Yeah.
when it comes to that kind of creativity.
And I guess all the tools that we're building, improvements we're making, are to make it more convergent, right? Like you want it to do programming for you, or you want it to answer call center requests. So that's where all the
Exactly.
effort is being spent.
Like weed out the hallucination, like don't surprise me with anything, do exactly what I'm asking you to do. um but I don't know, in Star Trek you could ask Data to be silly and he wouldn't he? Like I don't I've never seen every episode, but you'd think that like you'd be like, Data, do the craziest, weirdest, stand-up comedy routine, and he would probably do it.
Yeah.
um
I mean, my favorite example is small talk. Like there's an episode where he kind of learns small talk. He's like,
yeah, okay, awesome.
and then he gets like really good at small talk. And by the end of the episode, he's just like talking about like literally nothing with a bunch of people in a networking.
I love that. I'm gonna watch that episode.
I
Um,
think the better Star Trek analogy is actually the holodeck, right? Of it was a space made for simulating an environment and an entertainment with characters who you knew were characters and weren't real, and were there to provide an experience and completely simulated experience with the AI computer. And so
yeah.
And
Can we
that's
go ahead,
the
Pat.
talk about like the amount of things in Star Trek that in the '90s I was like, this is ridiculous. This is never going to happen,
my
and
god.
literally happen now.
Yeah,
Like the notion in the holodeck of being like, put a rock there. I'd be like, how's it going to what rock looks like? How's it going
yeah.
to make a 3D mesh over rock? How's it going to like project that into 3D space?
We're holding tricorders right now, basically. Like this thing can do, it just needs like some laser beam. We talk with our watches. We have video calls. Like that alone in the 80s was like, you know, how's that gonna work?
Or like books, like a bunch of tablets with books. I remember being like, why would you want more than one screen? Here I am surrounded by like 15 different screens.
Totally, yeah. Well, and the
Remember
holodeck
the
analogy.
stacks? They had all those like stacks of tablets laying around, like the NCARS tablets or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say the holodeck analogy is something that we talk about at work a lot. In that we've created an AI, Simia is her name, or its name, simulation input assistant, and we're really excited about building this AI that does exactly that. Put a rock there. I want a new character that it has this backstory. I want to see a show about blah blah blah, and it will do its best to assemble it based on the I called it entertainment Lego before, but based on the pieces that it has. And it's actually the act of doing that and seeing something magically assemble before your eyes and then play is half of the fun right now. It almost doesn't matter what the story is after that, although we're very focused on storytelling. It's super fun to see that this like holodeck type experience actually possible in our lifetime.
Yeah.
That really tracks too, though. Like if you think about like a kid playing with Lego, like half the fun of a Lego set is assembling the Lego set, and then it's like kind of goes and sits on a shelf, and it's like, what else could we build out of Lego? It's like the building experience is what we enjoy the most.
Exactly.
It's like making a treehouse versus playing in a treehouse.
And then destroying it and remixing it and hybridizing. I remember when we were kids, we had some castle Lego and some space Lego, and so we had to make this like lore of like this new inhabitants on an old ancient castle planet. Like it was that remix culture was in our DNA from Lego.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like about other creative tools where, yeah, I mean, with Lego, I guess the cool thing is like with Lego, you know how to put it together, right? You do the instructions, you know how it works. And there is no plain language prompting for Lego. So like I think the equivalent would be that you have this set of Lego and you're like, build me a dragon, and then you just see like a dragon form. And I think the thing about that is that you know how all those pieces would have gone together. It would have taken you a really long time. Yeah, because of that time, you wouldn't have been able to go through so many iterations. And I see that with code right now. Like the most astounding plain text driven UI for me is ones that generate code that is like better than what I would have written, but exactly what I wanted to do by me pressing the tab button. And
Right.
because I have like a depth of like what it would have taken to get to that function or whatever, and like how annoying it would have been to think through that logic, then I appreciate it even more. So like and I don't have the hat of an artist. I don't have the hat of a painter or like a sketch, illustrator. So when I see Midjourney, I see stuff that's really cool. But when I see it generate code, I'm like, oh wow, that's actually there's a
Right.
lot of nuance to what's just come out there.
Yeah, you appreciate it. You appreciate it more because do you feel like, I mean, this is a big topic, but as someone who appreciates the code, do you also feel a threat or a fear over that as well? Like, wow, I pressed a button. This would have taken me a day. Because I think we're dealing with a lot of that in culture right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that erupted around the Figma announcement. I don't know if you saw that, but there's basically like a new AI feature. You tell it you want a design, it gives you the design. It trains on some components. People thought it was training on the community. And then
Yeah.
they did add in like a weather widget. And then that got into the training data. So you could generate the Apple weather widget. Um,
Oh,
I
I didn't hear that. Wow,
yeah. So they pulled
that's
it back.
spicy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We pulled it back because like you're basically going to your customers and you're saying, we're going to take the stuff you're doing and then we're going to make you obsolete. Won't it be great? Like that's one narrative
Yeah.
to it. Obviously that's
Yeah.
not what they're thinking, but that's kind of like what their customers are thinking. Some of them anyway.
We're
For
seeing
me,
like another thread there too, though, around if you think about the layers of AI, right? Like at the sort of like almost bottom layer, you have that co-pilot thing where humans still are driving a lot of the work, and then you have, something there kind of helping out, offering a helping hand, like R2D2. Like
for
just
example.
somehow
Just kidding.
they know how to help, but they're not like crazy helpful. It's just better with that piece. And then second, when you go a little bit further, it's okay. Well, now you've got the co-pilot that learned how to be a pilot and is ready to take over because it was like an apprentice training with the master that entire time. And that's exactly what happened in that
Yeah.
Figma analogy, right? It was there learning how to design. It's like, okay, put me in, coach. Like I'm ready to go.
I think the there's a lot of the paradigm shift is happening right now in software, especially where we are used to Photoshop or Figma or these programs working a certain way. We've got all these buttons, all these tools, file menus, right? That is going to that interface itself is going to go away to a new kind of holodeck type experience where there is no interface. You're using language or whatever your the easiest way to use your imagination is, whatever that is, sketching. And I think that these companies like Adobe and Figma, they got lots of money and lots of power and they know what they're doing, but they have this challenge of reverse engineering this new paradigm into the old paradigm. So people still want Photoshop to work the same way it was, but then now they want this added feature. Whereas for new software developers and people creating new products, we can start fresh. We can start with no interface, and that's a really exciting moment too.
yeah, let me give you an example of how fragmented and silly it is. Like I will go to ChatGPT Dolly and I will say like, show me a guy like at his terminal working. And then because it's a square, I will have to go to Photoshop and then make it into landscape and use generative fill. And then I will have to copy that and put it into Figma to do my layout. And then I'll have to copy that into a Google Slide to send it to people. And so I think that I totally agree. And I see the world where these features of these products are pulled out of the product itself. And I think it can happen in two ways. One of them is a bottom up way where
Mm,
there is still a Photoshop in the background, but I don't care. In the same way, I don't care that the terminal's there. It's just
yeah,
going to go use Photoshop and it's going to put the background fill. That's one way.
yeah,
Another way is that there is a kind of like killer creative suite. And I can actually say, one of the prompts I can do is give me the tools from Photoshop. And it will just kind of know that I
Whoa.
Photoshop,
yeah,
just recreate the tools. And I can use the things I'm used to
yeah.
inside of like this everything tool. But the current workflow is so smashed together, and yet it is way faster than anything that has existed. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
Yeah,
can
yeah,
create
yeah.
this super realistic version of exactly what was in my mind and put it in a presentation and send it across the world like in like less than 10 minutes is just beyond.
but you're still like, oh, I gotta open Photoshop. Like
No,
you're still,
this is
oh,
BS. I can't wait till the future.
save to my desktop, and now I gotta touch it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have to
You
press
know,
Control C and then I have to press Control V. Oh my god,
Yeah,
it's the
dude.
worst.
give me the tools from Flash MX behaviors.
If only we could go back. We have to go back.
But then this is the push and pull, right? Because like the same people who are like, oh, why are they making AI do my job are the people who are like, do my job for me. Like kind of automate this thing. So they're like,
Yes,
and I feel that for me. I'm like, yeah, I want somebody else to do this thing. Do I still want to have a job? I guess so. I mean, maybe if I don't have this job, I can find another job. I'm a little bit more optimistic about it. But I think you can't ask for like better workflows and then also be surprised when those workflows take over what you were doing.
yeah, that's true. And I don't know, it depends on the company and the nature of your job, but like there are so many other hats that you might need to wear in your job or be asked to wear in your job, like especially as a creative.
Yeah.
Like you now aren't just a concept artist, you can make the music to go with it, you can make the film to go with it. Like
Mhm.
you have all these, you have this multimodal creativity that I think that creative people should be more excited about that than the threat of, their very factory work type job going away. I hope that creative people embrace that side of it.
Yeah.
There's a helpful way of thinking about this, and I think where any manager, like if you've had experience, sort of you've been in the field for a while and you've moved from one role up to like a role kind of
Coffee.
more senior
Yeah.
to that, and then you went kind of above that. There's a helpful way to. I think you had some experience with letting go a part of something you enjoyed doing and giving it to
Hmm.
someone else, right? And so people who have had that a little bit more experience in terms of moving quote unquote up a ladder, or at least let's say moving sideways along a value chain, if depending on how you believe in management hierarchy. Um, but something I heard recently that really helped me out was thinking, okay, at a base level, the first thing you want to get rid of is administration. Nobody likes administration. Almost everybody wants to get rid of administration from their day to day, right? And so there's whole functions, of helping out with that. Then the second layer is saying, okay, well, you want to get rid of actually delivery of the service that you're creating. This is the hardest one because that's usually why most people got into a particular field, right? Like you got into creative because you like creative, or you got
Hmm.
into marketing because you love the marketing greats, not because you necessarily want to run a marketing company, because you love marketing. You got into,
Hmm. Hmm.
being a personal trainer because you love fitness, not because, you want to run a personal training empire. It's like you like that thing.
Yeah.
But then at some point, the game changes and you sort of realize, okay, I've done this long enough. I'm ready to move on and do like the next thing. And then you start to automate marketing, and then you automate sales, and then you automate leadership, or at least you delegate and get rid of those pieces. So that ladder from administration to delivery to marketing to sales to leadership and moving through the functions of an organization and systematically shedding, more and more of that is one model, for kind of like who and not how to do something anymore. And when I think about that in this context, it's like, okay, well, which parts of the storytelling are we letting go of, and how far do you go, and like how far is this going to run, right? Until, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think there's a real beauty in like the master and apprentice relationship, and I think this is what you're saying, Al, that like as we grow, as whatever our passions are, we are handing that over to the next generation. I think the problem right now is that you're not just handing it over to someone you've nurtured, and taught them your craft. You're handing it over to like a, trillions of neurons in a cloud somewhere, and that just doesn't have that same feeling. But if we focus on the personal progression, for sure, I think that's and now in our lifetime, and in our children's generation, they'll have the ability to have multiple careers and have that growth again and again and again, because the tools are supporting them along the way. Yeah, entering a really exciting time.
Yeah. So
That freaks me out, thinking about kids and what their career is going to be like. You painted a rosy picture. I can imagine a less rosy picture, but I'm not even going to share that right now.
Let's end on that. Let's end on the dark note.
The future for our children is more tarnished than ever. First, we ruined the planet, then we ruined the internet, then we ruined our own economy.
Yeah, and we're like, it's the boomers' fault. No, yeah. It's us. We'll end on that, though, on the dark note.
See you guys. Have a great day, everyone.
I don't have the dark note, but I'm not going to get into it. Pietro, tell us 20 years ago, if you told your younger self, hey, this is the thing you should be working on, what would you have said? Like, you're like, hey, I got this like generative storytelling thing and I think there's these 3 different participants, and the way we tell stories and experience stories in the future will change.
What would my younger self have?
Yeah.
How would my younger self have reacted? I mean, I got a secret to tell you guys. I did that. I traveled in time, and I went back. I've never said that out loud. But no joke, it kind of did happen, where like I remember watching in YSDN, the Sheridan Lab, our common background, York Sheridan design. I remember, working slaving away at Illustrator or something, and having a talk by Ben Goertzel had a talk about the technological singularity coming, and that was probably 20 years ago. And he's this crazy guy, and like I remember thinking
Ray Kurzweil.
Oh, Ben Goertzel and Ray Kurzweil. I read that book 20 years ago too. The Singularity is Near.
But okay.
But yeah, and Ray Kurzweil, I had that book, and so for some reason I was obsessed with this idea, and probably from sci-fi and Terminator 2, and there's a bunch of fear that drove that curiosity. But I think back then I was like, the question was, could AI be creative? Could robots could drive a car, robots could work in a factory, robots could, navigate, could coordinate airplanes, but they could never be creative. And so I had that curiosity a while ago, and I didn't know. It was a question. So I think if I did travel back in time, I still might not have believed it, because personally and culturally, I think we believe that creativity was this untouchable human thing, that you could never get a robot to write a poem and for it to be beautiful. So yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question, Pat, because yeah, definitely 20 years ago I was thinking about this stuff, but I think that I probably would have believed that creativity was
did. That was such a shocker, right? Like, I don't know when it came, but it was like it had to be partway through 2023 when Midjourney and Dolly and, like Stable Diffusion and ChatGPT was writing sonnets and all this kind of stuff, that people were like, oh crap, like, this thing is
That was the
way
moment.
better at
Yeah.
rhyming and drawing and telling stories than I am. And like, holy smokes. And it still can't do my taxes. So actually it's better at, creativity than it is at numbers. Like,
Yeah.
who would have guessed? Like, that was the last thing. Because up until then, computers were all about, it's just such a pendulum swing for people. And so culturally, you're absolutely right. I love that you called this out. It's like, culturally, there was this feeling that, yeah, well, at least that's our safe haven. That's the harbor. That's the castle we can always defend in is creativity, and we will hold this one. But AI was just like, and got that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and I remember in 2018, 2019, when I quit my job at Secret Location Entertainment One. I was very happy there, but I was so keen on pursuing what AI would do to creativity back then, that I like threw all that away and started Transitional Forms to make a film with the National Film Board and all that stuff. I didn't quite know what to call it back then. Even I think at that point I knew it was coming. It wasn't culturally there yet, but I was calling it creative machine intelligence back then because there was no name for it. Now it's Gen AI is really what I was trying to say, and the technology of story is what I was trying to push. And now that's a large language model, So yeah, that was an exciting moment to see that. And for me, my ego had to go on a journey there too, where I'm like, no, it should be called this, or like, this is what. But to watch it unfold, and definitely, Al, that was a moment where Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, ChatGPT, that was the moment where everybody's mind changed, and we actually named it as a culture too, so that we know what it is. We're pointing at the same thing. Yeah, I feel like an old man recounting that time.
A year ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
A year is a long time in the AI
And
world.
it
That's for
is.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then a year from now, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how these tools get put together. Yeah, and I do think about the careers of the future, and we went to design school, and we learned typography and layout, and all these jobs were done by different people, right? So
Yeah.
it's not unreasonable to say, like, in the future, a product designer, a PM, an engineer are all going to be like the same job. So I think that there's, like you were saying, it kind of frees us up to have multiple careers, but it might also be that the career that we think of in the future is actually a set of careers that we think about right now.
Yeah. Some combination of roles for sure.
Yeah. And it's daunting to think about, but I always think, like, you just kind of need, maybe it's AI, but you always just need different personalities on a team. Like, you need somebody who's like worrying about the risks, and you need somebody who's like, hey, this is where we could go with it. And you need somebody who's like, let's just get something out there. And yeah, at the end of the day, that feels like what the role is. The role is to kind of play a role of a personality and figure out how to get stuff done.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what excites me about the if we watch this episode a year from now, this will be old. But the rage now is multi-agent systems, right? So you can say, and we're doing that at Transforms too. We're saying you are responsible for audience interaction. You are responsible for creating world building. You're responsible for writing, and so and then to get these different roles to negotiate, but it's happening at lightning speed is crazy. They're having these conversations at the speed of light, literally. And you watch this happen and you're like, this would take even my best team 3 weeks to agree on this, and it's still not good. It's still like clunky, but like the fact that you can have those roles and different agents speaking to each other is exciting and absolutely terrifying at the same time.
When
Yeah,
you say it's clunky, I'm like, I'm so not worried. Like if it's starting to work, it's like, remember when, you asked Midjourney to draw a cat in Midjourney version 1 and what that looked like compared to now, the difference? And it's like, okay, we know where this is going, right? Like it's going towards the best version of whatever you ask it to make that's ever been made. Like that's what it's like,
Yeah,
or human
yeah,
equivalent of at least there. And then we're just going to have so much more volume because there's, how many of those teams can you spin up at a time? There's no talent gap once we get there. Like there's no dearth of
totally.
talent. We just created an entire population of the most talented individuals in the world to make more stuff. Like that's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. So you had a dark side, Alan. I just saw your positivity come out there.
Oh,
We got him.
dude, I'm
We got him
bipolar as hell on all of this stuff.
on this stuff.
Yeah,
Same
because it's
here.
either
Yeah, yeah.
amazing and like you're like, of course I could see how this is going to be great, or it's like I could see this, maybe not being as great as we would like it to be,
You
and
have to balance out the love and the fear at the same time, but not forget the love part. Like it's easy to just be fearful, but like society is driven by stories. We shape how each other feel by telling stories. Like we got to tell a really positive story about this in order to shape that future. Just like Star Trek came out with all these ideas, and then we moved towards them. I think it's more important than ever to do that now. But I was going to say, do you guys ever go back to Midjourney 1 or Midjourney 2? Like
I've not.
force it back then.
Right.
It's so awesome. I almost, like I said, I missed the hallucination times. It's so cool to
Right.
like go back and see it try and struggle and mess up. It's yeah. Again,
There
I'm
was like
nostalgic for that.
there was a specific yeah, it's I love that feeling of nostalgia associated with it, and I feel exactly the same way you feel, where it was like that was its own thing. Like Gen AI hallucinations was a completely new art form that we were all
Style.
exposed
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
Like nobody had
exactly.
done that before. Like, you could say there was impressionism and there was realism, and then there was AI hallucinationism, and that was like it had its own quirks and
Totally.
specific visual characteristics, which you know we'll reference again one day. And it's not like they're completely gone. I still see great photorealistic images of it's like three kids flying through a ghetto over men in black, and it's like perfect in the style of like a 1960s black and white documentary photo, and you're like, oh, that's so cool, who thought of this? And then you
I'm
look and the
prompting
kid's
that
got
right
like
now, Al.
he's got a
Just
third
kidding.
arm, and you're like, why does this kid have a third arm? Right? Like you
Yeah,
got everything else so
yeah.
perfect, but this kid just has
And
a
there's
third
this
arm.
weird,
Bummer.
creepy hand floating up behind its head. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like we're not quite there, but it almost doesn't even matter. I look at that and I'm like, this is dope. Right. So it's like the hand of the artist is there, literally and
Yeah,
figuratively.
yeah, yeah.
See what I did there, guys?
That was artful. Well, we know what Pat's workflow is. He would download that picture, he'd take it into Photoshop, he'd use the different AI to Photoshop it out, then he'd save it again. Yeah.
Fixing the AI's mistakes. This is where
Ugh, pain in the butt.
Oh, I can't wait for the future.
Remember in Spaceballs where I forget what they were doing. Oh, they were in ludicrous speed and they went to put it put it to stop the ship, and they're like, out of order. Even in the future, nothing works. And I think of that every day.
yes,
I think of Spaceballs every day. I admit it.
baseball is literally genius. Like there are multiple references I have in my mind to Spaceballs. So good.
High referenceability for sure. Um,
Yes.
I, I wanted to call something out, because we're talking about like a lot about the idea of the co-pilot and software and the type of stuff we're going to be using. And a trend that I'm seeing is like you kind of called out, Pete, earlier, of the move away from all these interfaces and towards just getting done what you need to get done. So it less
Hmm.
being driven by a series of workflow and tasks and more around an outcome, right? Of like, I'm just looking for this outcome. And you're not really building a tool, you're building an agent or a person or somebody who knows how to achieve an outcome.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's more and more about like trusting the space in between, as far as like, I don't care how you get from here to here. It's just, I want to go over here. It's like, this is the problem that I have, and this is the promised land. And are you going to take me there via teleporter? Are you going to take me there via boat? Are you going to, or sorry, are you going to get there? Like, I don't care how you get there. You could, you know, roll magic beans and whatever. It doesn't matter. So this idea of like creating outcome driven products is actually a shift, I think, for product managers and for creators to move towards. Of, I'm not building workflow tools as much anymore as I am adding people to the process. I'm not creating tools for people so much as I am adding more people. And these people have jobs, and are they good at their jobs or not? And if they are, my company wins. If they're not good, my company fails. It's about, you know, you get revenue as a business when your agent creates the value your customer wanted, or the outcome that your customer wanted. And that alignment between, oh, you know, I made Photoshop a little bit easier to use versus I made it easy for you to get any image edited any way you want. Like, that's a different thing. And that's like a different mindset, from like a task-based mindset to an outcome-based mindset. And you're selling, you know, time or a bundle of features versus you're selling almost like synthetic time, which leads to, you know, actual outcomes, right? And then you can pull the time right out of it because there's no value to it, right? Or the value is so low that you would never sell that component. You're going to be selling the outcomes, and then you can track that forward very quickly and just being like, you know what, the cost of all of this stuff is just going to continue to collapse and collapse and collapse and collapse. But I just wanted to share that idea of like the task-based mindset. And I'm thinking about this a lot in the tools that we're developing as I'm spotting opportunities for software, you know, at the studio. This task-based mindset versus the outcome-based mindset, and the difference between the two. Building an agent versus building a tool. And I'll throw that out for you guys to be like, can you think of a software or a trajectory in software that you're using right now that's moving towards that?
That is outcome based versus task based.
Yeah, exactly. It's less of a workflow and more of a, I'm paying a computer to do something for me, rather than I'm paying some people to make software that I use.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the way I see that, and maybe this isn't what you're talking about, Al, but all the software that we use right now has that little magic wand or that little star or that little circle, or and it's like use AI, and every software is having the same challenge where we're sitting down with this task-based mentality, and they're trying to just sneak it into the old paradigm, which is great. It's putting it at our fingertips, but I just see a future where we just have to restart and be like, don't
Yeah.
even use all those buttons. Don't, the task, to your point, isn't there anymore. Now just imagine the outcome, imagine the steps to get there. And yeah, software of the future isn't going to have, we spent all these years in designing interfaces and typography and, you know, and communication. And that's it's a different design mentality now.
Well, I think like one of the pieces is that have you guys played with Claude? I still haven't played with it yet. I just see like tweets about it.
Yeah,
No.
same here.
It has like a generative UI to it, so you can kind of like make a noise. Like this is a thing that I need is like noise, or like I need sort of like a texture pattern, and it'll like create like the sliders for you, and it outputs a tool for you, right? So you kind of go there with a blank text box, and then you can kind of generate this UI. I think that the question though there is, what did I open to get there? So like even in this world where everything is outcome based, it's like, well, I opened something. What was my
Yeah.
intention there? And then because of that original, you know, intent, it's gonna shape everything else that comes after. Because Photoshop, people open Photoshop to do something, and they have to like put something in the middle between you and your task to let you know about this new thing you can do. And you see that's the AI button. Yeah, I know you're making a doc, but you don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
So there's no app other than, let's say, like a ChatGPT that I open with a kind of broad intent where I keep
Yeah.
open and kind of like copy paste stuff between. So I do wonder, like, what is that thing that you would open that would be like, hey, you can do anything here? Because as we know, like, the key of design is affordances. And if my app has no affordances, I'm just like,
Hmm.
it's like staring at a blank page, right?
Remember when Yahoo had their homepage and it was like all these different categories and all these
Yeah.
different buttons and color themes and whatever, and then Google came out with boom, just that
Oh, yeah, that was so
power
good.
move.
Such a power
We're
move,
going
man.
through that similar thing to like just to Pat's thought there. It's like that's what it's turning into, is
Yeah.
like this window into whatever is now the new way, rather than click this and move that and watch
And
a tutorial
what
on
was
how
the
to.
original prompt in Google? Like, what are you looking for?
There was a I'm feeling lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that was if you wanted to search and just go to the first link.
To the first one, yeah, but yeah,
But
what was
in
the
the
original?
what was the text, like the suggestion text in the text
Guys,
box?
let me Google it. It says search the web using Google. Yeah.
The
That
internet.
sucks. I
Search
don't
the
think
web
that's the
using
original.
Google.
Boring.
They worked for months on that.
That's designed by
they
committee,
they
man, if I've ever
they
seen
had
it.
to they user tested that.
Yeah, we kind of need a new Google, I think, if we're going to have all these AI capabilities. But I think, Al, what you're talking about is you're kind of talking about like these kind of microtransaction-y kind of service-based tasks. Like, hey, I'm the guy who turns like a Word doc into a PDF, and I'm the guy who turns like a Photoshop comp sketch into a presentation. And I think that's like it reminds me of like a pitch around Dropbox, and the thought was like in Dropbox you could have a thing that just says like convert to MP3, and you would just drag your files, and then it would convert the stuff and put it into a new file.
Hmm.
But like the question is like, how does that happen? Like, is it a files based interface? Is it a website with a search box?
Yeah.
What is that thing that you go to and you're like, oh, I know what I can do here. I can put my PowerPoint in here. How do you convey that or affordance for this everything box?
Yeah, and like there's as soon as you start to break down any workflow, you start to realize there is need for component parts or objects or different artifacts along the way, which you could return to, or reuse, in some way. And I think this is why, like, the docs metaphor, like, still hangs on. Like, as much as we're trying to get rid of docs and just, have apps, there's still like, and maybe this is less about the actual utility of it and more about the vestigial cultural hangover of like we just got used to it from paper and then we brought it into computers and we still kind of can't get rid of it until we get to that point where, to me, I think the everything prompt is where we got to with ChatGPT or Claude, where you just kind of ask for like, like what are you looking to do? Like, what do you want? Like, I'll give it a crack, right? Like, as a computer, tell me what you want. I'm going to give it a crack. And then the gap between that actually working out and what you started with, that's where we start to need to do different things. Where it's like, okay, well, actually, now I have to copy and paste this here because it gave it its best crack, but ChatGPT doesn't have workflow tools around creating, like a Figma demo where you're doing like a clickable prototype. Like, it just can't do that. It doesn't have that modality yet. And so I think as that modality extends, it feels like it's going to start in the same spot. I don't know. I'm kind of stream of consciousing this right now because I'm thinking about it, like what that looks like. But to me, it feels kind of like exactly what Pete said. Yahoo, all of these categories here will give you everything. You just like you have minute control versus, hey, we'll figure it out for you. Just tell us what you're looking for or tell us what you want. Like, that's the dichotomy. And then everything's going to kind of like end up at different spaces in between, depending on how good the algorithm is at finding what you want or creating what you need.
Yeah, I think about discoverability. Like, I think that the challenge, and Google's commercials are great for this, is like they show you planning a wedding in France, and they show you somebody like how they're using Google, because often you don't know how you can use it without observing other people. And
Mm-hmm.
I get this vision of like a transit station in my mind, which is like I walk through a transit station and I look at people and I see what they're doing. Oh, they're like buying coffee. Like this person's like sitting down reading a book. Like this person's on their phone. This person's like pushing a stroller. And there's like just kind of like the environment exudes to me suggestions about what I could be doing. So I wonder about that for like Google or Yahoo. Like I think what both of those things are missing is observing other people's behavior. That's happening a bit more on Twitter because people like post about what they're doing. But I could imagine like, instead of opening a blank page, I actually like open it up and I see what somebody did with it. Yeah, and then like, oh, that's like a new thing I could do. It's like the tips that pop up before you start your software. Did you know like the cut tool is underneath this menu? Like
That'd be
how would you
crazy if someone like made an interface where you had to use it in a social way, like Discord or
yeah.
something like that, where you just had to use it that way. That would be an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think that's the secret growth of Midjourney is that to use it for free, you had to do it in the community channel.
Yeah,
But then you get
publicly demonstrate your
easy.
your painful experience. You're
Yeah.
putting it out. It's awesome.
It's like there were like multiple prompts that I copied from something that looked good. That's
Totally, yeah. That's how we all learn to prompt is inspired by what other people were doing. I think that I really do believe that, I don't think that traditional entertainment is going away, or there's always going to be what's an analogy? The light bulb came out, but candles are still a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Like we all enjoy a beautiful artisanal candle. Many forms of media are going to be like that, where we will never not enjoy going to the theater or going to see a film, right? But the new forms of media are exactly what we're talking about now, where it's an idea that Al might have made this dream, this experience that's just math, and passes it on to Pat. Pat experiences it in a different way than Al, but it's like, oh wow, that's cool. I tweaked this, and you're going to pass it back, and people will be remixing each other's entertainment, and it'll still be generating for us. It's a weird world, but it's remix culture, and it's hyper personalization, and that's coming in media and almost everything that we do, and software, like what we're talking about now.
What was that? Maybe it was Altered Carbon, or maybe it was something else. But it was basically, there was like a whole industry around like creating super weird experiences in people, like weird kind of like torture experiences, or like also like super strange stuff. And then they would download those memories and you could buy them and then kind of like experience them or watch them. And it was like, that was like a elitist thing to do, of like, buy these super weird niche experiences created by someone else. And so, without the dark side of that,
Are you guys Tim and Eric fans from back in the day?
Tim and Eric, awesome show. Great job.
Yeah, great job. There's one with Paul Rudd where he goes into this big holodeck room, and he goes up to a computer.
Paul Rudd's computer.
And he makes Tane, this like character. That's what it's gonna be.
I'm okay.
That's gonna be someone's job, is to just sit there and make Tane for the day, and then go home, and then come back the next day.
Dude, I feel like we're not far off, man. Like I'm not going to work. I'm like, is this what I'm doing now?
Yeah.
See, that reminds me of I think it was Westworld, where they were like making kind of the fictions. Like the robots took over in the last season, and they were making the fictions that the humans would live out, and like writing the twists and turns for these people's lives. Which reminds me of like Truman Show. I saw this tweet, and it was that guy from the Truman Show who's like the director. You know that guy? What's his name?
It's Ed Harris.
Ed Harris, yeah.
And it's just like him standing there. It's like, let's give him COVID. Speaking about but it makes me...
there's a thought experiment along with this, though, which is, if you imagine imagine living life and everything that you want to happen happens just the way that you wanted. You wanted, to get this car, and then you got this car, and you wanted to win this race, and then you won that race, and then you wanted to travel here, and then you traveled there, and you wanted this person to do that for you, and then they did it. And you live out your life, you got everything you wanted, and you die, and you're like, that was great. Now you get to do it again. And how many lifetimes does it take before that gets boring and you wish someone just threw a COVID in there to kind of like mess things up, right? And that's what that is of, that's the Matrix. Remember the machines? They're like, the first Matrix was a paradise, but humans rejected it because you guys can't handle that. You need suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an Alan Watts snippet, I think, about like if you could dream whatever dream you wanted every night, eventually that would get boring, and you'd want to dream a dream where you have to struggle and you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Yeah, so basically we live in a simulation. That's really what we're.
That's how
really
we
what
end
we're
every
saying.
show is like we get to
Yes.
that point where we're like, so guys, have we confirmed it again? It's right. Via a different route, we end up at the same
Confirmed.
point. Yeah.
But in some ways, that's what you're building, right? Pietro, you're building a simulation making machine.
Yeah, and we used to call them shows. We used to call them, what's the outcome of this? It's not a video because it's a real time thing, but there's a linear process, but you can influence that. Like again, naming has been really an exciting challenge, but we've landed on simulations, and that is the kind of like the form of media that we're creating. And similar to the holodeck, you ask the computer what you want and it does its best job to build it. But we've gone through the process that we're describing here, where at first we created all the interfaces and all the dials and all the drop downs, and it's still there. But eventually we were like, this is way too much work. I just want to have an input, ask for a new character, with a purple cowboy hat, and then boom, it makes it and names it, writes the backstory. Then if I want to go remix it, I can. But yeah, exactly this process that we're talking here, where you've got all this clunky interface, and then really you just need that magic window, and it's going to do it for you. But it's nice to be able to go and refine it, because sometimes you want to open the ChatGPT brain and be like, but why did you say that? Why did you do, like, give me access to, or where was my prompt wrong at the start? I'm trying to get you to do this thing and you're not listening to me. So somewhere along the line, I messed up, but show me where. I want to go back and tweak that. So that's important too. We still need those like twirl down menus or access to the code base.
Perhaps we just generate them on the fly when you need them. But
that's true. Yeah, I guess that was your point. Like, make it like Photoshop, because that's what I'm used to.
Yeah, that blows me away. Pat, I love that idea of like the generative UI of, okay, I need to be able to touch this in some way. Like, I'm describing to you how to do it and you can't quite figure it out. I need a little bit more control. Could you make me a handle where I could just like grab onto this and like, move it the way I want to move it? It's like, sure, here's the handle. Okay, cool. And now you like get a handle on it. That's awesome.
It needs to be 3D, not 2D. Sure, here you go. Yeah.
Or like, I'm used to Salesforce. I'm like, I don't know Photoshop. Show me it as if it was Salesforce. It's like, okay. I don't know what that would look like, but
I feel like that's a whole. Somebody's going to do like a whole Twitter thread on that of like Photoshop if it were Salesforce, right? Or using ChatGPT if it were Salesforce, if it were whatever. Those like, what are all those? It's like such a meme right now. People do like, like Harry Potter if it was, a 50s Panavision. Movie trailer, right?
I love those things. The latest one.
There's something nerdy about that for software, though. Of like, let's do a series like that for software. Nerds will love it.
Yeah. It's a hit.
If anybody wants to do that, I will retweet. Like one of the things that makes me think about your kind of narrative piece and like throwing around these stories is the notion of computational irreducibility from Stephen Wolfram, which is that you can't know the outcome of a system until you've run through it, which is kind of related to the simulation in the Alan Watts piece.
Say that again, Pat. I don't know that term. It's the what reducibility?
Computationally irreducible,
Computationally irreducible. Cool.
which is just to say,
Basically, you
like,
can't jump to the end of a equation.
yeah,
You have to run the equation.
you have to
Run
to know
through it.
the
Interesting.
outcome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And like when you add the human dimension, that's definitely true, right? Like you won't know how people morph or what they do in the story until you run it through, and then maybe you run it through many times to see and pass it around. But
Until
it
you
just
do
makes
know
me
what they're going to do, and it's just the same thing they did last time, and then you get the fifth version of the Matrix, right?
From the AI's perspective, though, that's really weird because it doesn't necessarily perceive time, and it's like stuck dealing with humans in this dimension where we have to linearly experience something and then wait. Yeah, exactly. Because that's so cool.
Yeah, you're getting onto another track here of like, is computational irreducibility real, or is it a byproduct of our understanding of time? Is there a
It's real
slice
to
in the
us.
future where it's done already and running through it is, we
Yeah.
experience that, but it's already there. Like the answer's there. It's predetermined, as it were. Is every future predetermined, or
Do we have free will? Or, is everything
do you
fixed?
know Kurzgesagt, Pete? Like if
Yeah, for sure.
They did a great one on free will. It was really, really strong. And like me and Telly watched it. We were freaked out. We were like, that's okay, cool.
I watch that those with my son all the time too, and I'm almost watching him watch it and be like, "Is this?" We watched the black holes one the other night. My daughter got scared, but I'm like, "Am I gonna break my kid's brain on this, or is this gonna, unlock something new?" I love those.
No, he's building on a strong foundation with Kurzgesagt. You watched the one where it was the entire history of the Earth in an hour. Have you seen that one?
No, I'll have to watch that.
It's excellent. It's basically just an hour where each second is a million years, or
wow,
each like 1/10 of a second is a million years, something along those lines. And it
it's
just
an
sort of
Earth speed run.
It's like a panning shot that just pans from left to right, and the landscape is changing, and like asteroids are landing, and ice ages are happening, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love
and it's
that.
got this epic, like kind of like garage rock psychedelic, like you just smoke a ton of weed and watch this thing, is like clearly what they designed it for. They're like, dudes, what if we just made one for us to smoke weed and watch? Like that's
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this would be it.
Kid friendly though too, obviously.
You know what? Kids are like, they're kind of high all the time, so it's like
Yeah, they are.
They like it even better. So dudes, I think we're there. I think we hit the end of our conversation for today. What are you going to change? What's different in your life, Pete, moving forward? And then I'll pass the same question to you, Pat. I'll think about it for me. What did you learn? We spent an hour thinking and talking about this stuff. What's different for you?
I don't understand the question.
The point of this podcast is for us to learn in public and try to figure out new things about this whole, train that we're on that's barreling towards the future at the rate of 1 second per second, and to try to figure out where it's going so we're not so surprised when we get there, and to have some agency of moving it around off the tracks, and to help others who are listening to the show do the same thing, to just learn and figure out where they're going. So where are you going, Pete? What's changed?
Okay, so like, what's the takeaway from this conversation?
I could have said that, but it would be so succinct and understandable, and I needed to just jumble it up a little, so make it sound pseudo-intellectual. And
what are you thinking? So I really like this idea of like as a designer, or with a design background, I like this idea of asking for interfaces that you need in order to participate in the system that you're trying to achieve a goal within. That's I'm really like I'm really excited by that idea, and I think that makes sense as we're these like social primates, and we can use tools, and you put a hammer in our hand and everything's a nail, and it's like, I think that's the thing that is missing from our magic window AIs right now, and yeah, Pat, you said it, like give me an interface that I'm familiar with so that I can use this, so I can access what this thing can do better. I think I'm really excited about that notion. That's definitely a takeaway for me. But what about you guys?
Yeah, for me, I think I'm still stuck on like the Google versus the Yahoo landing pages, and
Yeah,
like what is that new landing page? And I think that's quite exciting to think about. Like
Mm.
there is now like an everything machine, and yeah, the interface can morph, but like the starting point is the same. And I go back and forth, which is like it's never going to happen because we make tools. To your point, and I'm always going to go to the tool that's the best for the job, or it's definitely going to happen because AI will be the starting point for every task I do, and I'm going to kind of go to one place to get my tools, like the tool shed. And yeah, maybe it is stark and like just kind of empty, and so that's one piece. And then the observability piece, like I do wonder, like through the mid journey thing, or like through sharing these stories back and forth, like how can you be inspired by the things that are coming out of the machine that other people have made? Um,
and remix them yourself and send them back and,
yeah,
hey, check out what I did. Yeah,
yeah, because that was for Flash, like back in the day. That was the cool thing, is like you could actually see the source code, like you could,
totally.
and you could download it, and it was on the web. There were so many pieces built in there that was like a beautiful creative loop. So that yeah, I think that's for me is like the observability piece, the starting point piece, the like the tools piece. Um, but I think one thing we didn't get into is just like Toronto and like how does place matter in these things? I would love to participate more in Toronto, like go to more events and stuff around this, and like just have more of a culture of creativity. So maybe I don't know if this is like too many questions, but I would love to know like how to achieve that. Is like as much as the internet matters and this virality matters, so does place. And I mean, we're video calling each other, but we're all based in Toronto, so that says something. But yeah, I would love to know any proactive things to do in terms of community.
Yeah, I've certainly fallen uh, into more of an antisocial rhythm, especially since COVID. Like I used to be such a this is end on a hyper personal note, and Al still needs to do his takeaway. But I used to like feed off of people getting together, right? Big parties and going out and whatnot. And then COVID, we all had to find how to go inward and how to be like, okay, not doing that. And certainly, I found that, and I'm kind of in that rhythm still. So Pat, I really want to go to events and whatnot, but it's hard now post COVID to like to do that. But there is a magic to physical spaces and people gathering. It's like sometimes uh, I can't brainstorm on a video call. Like
Mm.
it doesn't work. I mean, we've been brainstorming this whole time, but like if you're under a deadline, you got to come
Yeah,
up with a solution, and just that half-second delay, there's not the like magic of like people gathering around a whiteboard. I'm such an old man,
yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like there's a magic there where people are physically together, and it's like I'm so woo woo about this, but the universe wants something to happen in that place. And yeah, maybe I went too woo woo
no, I'm
on your
buying it.
comment there.
I'm
Yeah,
taking this.
We
Yeah,
finally got
yeah,
there. Like, oh, come on! It's like all this foreplay, and now we can talk woo woo, right? So
okay,
finally,
yeah,
so I agree with all of that. I'll share two ways in which I've been more involved in community and less, and moreover, I feel like life stages, and so like my current life stage, my time kind of quote unquote after work is usually dedicated to my family, and I have less time
yeah,
for like going to events and stuff like that. My time during work hours, I've been trying to go to my office more, and I've been trying to like be out of my house more often, whereas I could do all of my work from my desk, and oftentimes there's nobody you know who I'm specifically working with at my office where I go to. um, but leaving the house and being a part of the city and just being on the streetcar or being on my bike, or being in a square, eating lunch around a bunch of other people, um, is just really positive, from like a raw energy, not really like professional or creative specific energy. It's just sort of like raw in general. So
Yeah.
I've been doing that a lot more. That's one. And then two is bringing people in for specific workshops at high points. And so I'm a big believer in the idea that in projects kick off and require a high degree of trust. And then over time, the amount of trust required to execute on the project kind of like tapers down, and you can move to lower bandwidth mediums where, you know, you can just send a Slack message here and there once everything's on the rails and you know what everyone's doing and you're in that sort of high trust space. But to get things pointed in the right direction and to, you know, find a shared understanding of what you're doing that in person. And so I make people like come work with me in person. And when I say I make, it's like I request, and you know, people are more than willing to do it. So those are two things that are more Toronto and more in person that I've been doing.
I don't know if this exists in Toronto, but I wish there was coffee shops and bars with whiteboards and fresh, crisp markers.
A fresh
I
marker.
think that we would yeah. That's what you buy a marker, and it gives you access.
You get a fresh one every day. That's what you have to pay for.
Oh yeah, that. I mean, no joke. I would hang out there because social stuff. I'm so into what you know. I'm so into talking about the future and all. We live in the most exciting time, and like I love combining that with a social activity and brainstorming and thinking of ideas and sharing, you know, perspectives. There are not enough places. I don't know of a single bar with a whiteboard and a fresh marker, but like Toronto needs that. There's an idea, Pat.
Yeah. Okay. It's like the creative tech nerd designer storyteller person creative version of Snakes and Lattes, or like the arcade bars like Track and Field or something, right?
I guess WeWork has free beer, but for $700 a month. Like I don't know if I can afford.
That's where you take it to the
whiteboard.
Bank. You just
yeah, flat beer, but it's free. Yeah. Anyways, no shade on WeWork, but yeah, we need more bars with whiteboards.
Okay, we'll get on it.
My takeaway is bars with whiteboards. That's my big one.
That was your
collaborating with people in person. That's it. That's the biggest tool, like, you know, future that I want to live into.
It is the future of Google. It's just a whiteboard. I love it.
You were patiently waiting that whole time, Al. But didn't Google deprecate their whiteboard tool? Jamboards.
Yeah.
Got me through COVID.
Oh, really?
But now,
yeah. I mean, it's hard to compete with Figma.
It is. Yeah, that's true.
What about Miro? Come on, Miro's dope.
Use Miro. It's great.
Oh, yeah? I don't know.
If you don't build software and need more controls, Miro is better because it has less controls than Figma. It's like 1/10 the complication level. So if you're just brainstorming and doing whiteboarding stuff and planning projects and building things, like, yeah, Figma is like, you know, you're buying a Ferrari to get to the mailbox, as the metaphor goes.
This episode is brought to you by
Ferrari. No, wait, Figma. No, wait,
Ferrari,
Miro.
yeah.
I don't know.
All right, guys.
By your new robot overlords.
Thank you, overlords. Thank you for the machines, and thank you, Pietro, for joining us for this episode.
Yeah, I love this. Thanks very much for having me.
Okay. Be well.
You too.
Bye, guys.